Well, for more on this, we're joined by Frank Sesno. He is the director of the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University, a former CNN Washington bureau chief and White House correspondent. And he occasionally filled in for Larry King. We reached him in Washington. Mr. Sesno, always good to have you on the show. Unfortunately, though, around these particular circumstances. But tell us your memories of Larry King.
Well, there are a lot because I spent a lot of time with him. As you said, I sat in for him. I remember when he came to CNN in 1985. And when I was hired at CNN in 1984, I was told explicitly, we don't have stars, the news is the star. That was the quote. That was the motto. Larry was the first star that CNN hired, and it did it very deliberately because it wanted to build a program in prime time. It was 9 o'clock Eastern time around a designated personality, a star. Larry then brought stars on the air, whether they were political stars, stars from the celebrity world, the world of entertainment or sports, and he talked to anybody, everybody, as you see there. And Larry and I wrote a book on asking questions, right? I could have had a whole chapter on Larry's questions because Larry, what he did through his questions was he didn't threaten, he didn't challenge, he didn't beat people up, he didn't put them on the defensive, which actually drove a lot of the journalists at CNN sometimes a little crazy because we wanted to see him do just that when he had the president on or a senator on. Instead, he said, why'd you support this bill? Like you just heard with an author. Why'd you write the book? He wanted to ask the questions that a normal audience would ask, a normal person would ask, a listener, a viewer, not a pointy-headed journalist. And he wanted to put the guest at ease, which he always did, which is why they flocked to his show. And he wanted to create a conversation from which he could pull a story. So that was Larry's art. And he loved it, by the way. He loved it.
You raised the issue around other journalists saying, why didn't he do this or why do that? But also the fact that he was such a success. So was there a certain bravery in the way he was and the way he asked his questions and not afraid to put himself out there in the way that he did?
I think so. And I think it came because Larry's career was formed from radio. He was a radio guy. He did radio interviews and he did overnight radio interviews. I had him to George Washington University about 10 years ago, and we had a wonderful conversation in front of about 300 people, many of them students and stuff. And he told this hysterical story about when he was on the air at Mutual Radio. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And he said he loved being live because then you have to dance and bob and weave with whatever happens. And he took questions, of course, both in radio and on television. And you're doing a lot of bobbing and weaving there. He said one night at about 1 o'clock in the morning, he got a call from a listener, and the listener goes, "Hi, Larry," and the listener's whispering, and Larry says to the guy, "Why are you whispering?" And he says, "'Cause I'm a thief." He says, "Where are you?" He says, "I'm at a house." And he says, "Why are you calling me?" "'Cause I'm a fan." So here he is on the air live, and he said they checked it out later the next day, and sure enough, there was a house apparently in the area where the guy said he was calling from that was actually broken into. He got an honorary degree, he told us one time, at Columbia Medical School or something like that. And he said, "I'm not a doctor. Why am I getting a medical degree?" Because he found that all the interns and stuff who were on rounds doing overnights listened to Larry King all night long. So Larry was raised on this dark side of people's lives, I guess. He spent very intimate time with them. And that intimacy, that familiarity, that spontaneity is what he thrived on and what became part of, 25 years on the air at CNN.
And really 60 years behind microphones of various sorts. We talk about that 10,000 hours needed to master something. Starting the way he did in radio, working in small markets and then moving and over up to the age of 87. What can we read into the sheer experience of that, and will we ever see the ability for someone to accumulate that much experience and to get as good at what they do as he was?
I don't know. There's a lot of airtime out there right now. The question is whether you'll have an audience like Larry King, because the audience is so diverse. Look, Larry said to me, this is true. He loved what he did. He loved people. He loved engaging them and pulling them out. And Larry had lots of turmoil and strife in his own life, bankruptcies and, 8 marriages and all this kind of stuff, and health issues. We have I'm at George Washington University now, as you pointed out. We have a big plaque on the wall as Larry King. We have a Larry King endowment. Larry King gave us money, and every year we support undergraduate and graduate students in the name of Larry King. He never went to college, and he said, this is what I'm giving you this because I want to make a difference in people's lives. I think that Larry was a one of a kind. He was of his era. Once upon a time, he would have done the Borscht Belt, as you might say. He was proud of what he aspired to, which always was to be on the radio and to engage people. After my book came out 3 years ago, he had me on the show he was doing, the internet show, the online show he was doing. And even then, and he was terrific. And, you just sat down and Larry started talking to you. And whether you were being asked questions or whether you were asking him questions, he was a storyteller in what he did. And he recognized that every person he has on the air is a story and has a story to tell. And that's what he tried to do, and he did it effortlessly with his questions. I sat in for him one time. I called down to the production team. I was having an author on that night, and I said, by the way, have you got the person's book? Can you send me the book? And actually, it was a few days in advance. And there was this awkward silence, and they said, what do you want the book for? Larry doesn't want the book. And indeed, Larry talked about it. You heard it just a moment ago. I don't need to read the book. I want to ask the questions the person who hasn't read the book asked. At times we thought that was laziness, but I don't think so. I think Larry knew it, and he had this intuition, and he could generate a fascinating conversation, I think, with the phone book if you'd asked him to do that.
One final question for you, if I might, Frank. There's been a lot of talk in recent weeks, of course, about the divisions in America. As far as I could tell, having watched him for many years, there wasn't a political bent to the way Larry King went about the way he asked his questions. Is there a need for someone like another Larry King these days? I
think so. And it might be quaint, and it might be anachronistic. It might be something we do at Jurassic Park, someday. I think Larry saw the essence of curiosity and the person. And he wasn't there to pick a fight, and he wasn't there to, challenge that person's, essence. He was there to ask him questions and to evoke the story. And he talked to some pretty, odious people. And he brought that sense of curiosity to him. He didn't let him off the hook, but he didn't grill them. He wasn't, he wasn't there to be the cross-examiner. But yeah, I think through it all was a certain respect for what that person had experienced. And it was very different. And Larry and I talked about this, would he fit in today's media marketplace? And I think he kind of recognized that he wouldn't. That today, at least for the moment, it is and has been about point of view and ideology, having an axe to grind, having a position. I think he'd be very uncomfortable opening a show with a monologue, the way many of them are open now. So, Larry King was a product of his time, and he helped shape his times. But I'm not going to give up on that. I think that there are different ways that the next Larry King can still take shape and will still have big audiences. So I'm hoping he'll be an inspiration too going forward.
You and me both. Thanks for this, Frank. Really appreciate your time remembering your former colleague and friend.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Frank Sesno, former CNN Washington Bureau Chief and Director of the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University, and we reached him in Washington.